welcome to Tigrai Television. I'm Mary Nimana, will be presenting the news for you today. Stay tuned. Many killed and wounded following consecutive aerial attacks by Eritrean forces in town of Adidaro, located in northwestern Tigray. Number of casualties is still being reported as first respondents continue to dig out bodies. The airstrike have left the small town devastated, with many houses and civilian properties destroyed. Eritrean forces have been shelling several towns across Tigray, leading to death and injury of many innocent civilians. Let's take a look at the scenes of the airstrike in Adidaro.
هو إمام معزي أنت ما مر حدا هذا سلمي يا بزن عباجه
Tigray External Affairs Office issued a statement this afternoon saying the international community's indifference to continued aerial attacks is emboldening Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki to continue killing innocent civilians. The office said the international community is treating these acts of barbarity as an intrinsic feature of conflict rather than as a part of a premeditated plan to exterminate the people of Tigray. Abil Sagaw.
Tigray External Affairs Office said the international community is treating acts of barbarity as an intrinsic feature of conflict. In a statement this afternoon, the office said the international community's indifference to continued air bombardments and artillery shelling on civilian targets is exacerbating the pain of Tigrayans and emboldening the Ethiopian and Eritrean governments to continue terrorizing and murdering innocent civilians through indiscriminate attacks. The statement said on 27th of September, Eritrean Air Force bombarded Adaro in northwestern Tigray, killing numerous civilians, injuring several more, and turning a residential neighborhood into ashes. The statement also said that shelling in town of Adurat in eastern Tigray and air bombardment in Shira northwestern Tigray was conducted on the same day. The office said government of Tigray remains committed to an immediate cessation of hostilities, regardless of the massive offensive launched by Abiy Ahmed and allies in quest for position of strength to be leveraged in peace talks. The office finally called upon the international community to get Abiy Ahmed to take concrete steps towards peace.
CNN's chief international investigative correspondent, Naima Al-Bagher, received the Emmy Awards for exposing the Ethiopian Airlines on using commercial flights to transport weaponries. Naima and her team at CNN were the first to confirm the presence of Eritrean troops in Tigray, and she has also done reports on weaponized sexual violence in Tigray and the mass detention, torture, and execution of Tigrayans in western Tigray. Sarah Tigray reports.
On the 43rd Annual News and Documentary Emmy Awards held last night at the Palladium Times Square in Manhattan, a report by CNN's Naima Al-Bagher, Ethiopia, exposing the hallmarks of a genocide, received this year's award in Outstanding Research News. The report, published in October of last year, exposed the Ethiopian Airlines on using its commercial flights to transport weaponries between Addis Ababa and Asmara.
Ethiopian Airlines has been transporting weapons between Ethiopia and Eritrea since the beginning of the war in Ethiopia that has seen thousands killed. According to aviation experts, this would constitute a violation of aviation law.
On the award, Chief International Investigative Correspondent Naima Al-Bagher thanked her team and also noted that the report on Ethiopia was one of the most difficult things that the team has ever done.
It's such a privilege to lead this team. It's such an honor to be up here as an investigative team. Everything we do, it's hours and hundreds of hours of video, of interviews, and especially with the Ethiopia story at its heart was this beautiful tradition in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church of memory keeping, of memorializing the loss and the tragedy and the pain. And it was both a privilege, but also I think one of the most difficult things this team has ever done, to have to walk people through excavating that pain and that loss. So I have to say, I'm so grateful to work alongside this extraordinary team.
Naima also extended her gratitude to the victims and survivors who shared their stories. Naima struggled to put into words the suffering of the people of Tigray and said that the situation carries all the hallmarks of a genocide.
I cannot, and this is my job, so I really should find the words. I cannot put into words how difficult this has been for the victims of this, all the of genocide. Of a U.S. administration that is waiting around announcing whether found that the Ethiopian government is guilty of genocide, to have an international community that looks away when things are difficult. So grateful to the people who willingly risked not only life, risked them to us. Thank you, and thank you to the Academy.
Naima Al-Bagher, a Sudanese-born journalist based in London, did several reports about the atrocities committed in Tigray by the allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. Her team at CNN was the first team to travel around Tigray and verify the existence of Eritrean troops inside the region. Mahbara Dego massacre, the use of rape as a weapon of genocide in Tigray, and the detention, torture, and execution of Tigrayans on western Tigray are also among the many coverages she had done about the genocide in Tigray.
Tigrayan diaspora in London held protests in front of the UAE and Turkish embassies, condemning two countries for their support to the Ethiopian government in almost 2-year-long war on Tigray. Protesters demanded that the two countries stop funding the genocidal war waged on Tigray and called for them to stand with Tigray. Sarah Kalali has more.
UAE! 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 Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you!
On Wednesday, protesters were present at the United Arab Emirates and Turkish embassies in the United Kingdom to oppose the supply of drones by the countries to the Ethiopian government. From signs condemning indiscriminate bombing and starvation to signs that read Tagaru Lives Matter were held up by protesters. EU member Turkey and the UAE have been supplying drones to the Ethiopian government since the onset of the war on Tigray. Drone attacks by the Ethiopian government targeted civilian installations, causing fear in the state. Protesters demanded that support by the UAE to Abiy Ahmed as well as Isaias Afwerki stop and called for the end of the war on Tigray and restoration of humanity.
UAE! 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 Tagaru lives matter! Tagaru lives matter! Tagaru lives matter! Tagaru lives matter! UAE! UAE! Stop supporting Isaias Afwerki! Stop supporting Isaias Afwerki! Stop supporting Isaias Afwerki! Stop supporting Isaias Afwerki! Stop supporting Abiy Ahmed! Stop supporting Abiy Ahmed! Stop supporting Abiy Ahmed! Stop supporting Abiy Ahmed!
Lastly, protesters called for the restoration of telecommunication services that has left Tigray in a communications blackout for 15 months, as contacting family members in Tigray has been virtually impossible for many Tigrayans living overseas.
We want access to Tigray! We want access to Tigray! We want access to our family! 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 humanity. Restore humanity. Reconnect Tigray. Reconnect Tigray. Reconnect Tigray. Reconnect Tigray. Reconnect Tigray. Reconnect Tigray. Tigray can't wait. Tigray can't wait. Tigray can't wait. Tigray can't wait.
Prisoners of war captured by the neutralization taken by Tigray Defense Forces in Barahla front say Eritrean government has deployed 5 infantry and mechanized divisions in the battle. Our reporter spoke with the prisoners of war, including Deputy Commander of the 99th Battalion, Garim Kail Takhlu, who says the army planned to take up Mala on the 17th of September in its most recent offensive. Let's take a look.
سراويتات حنتي لا سوسان حدا لا سوسان شوعتن سوسان شوعتن لك 38 حنت بريجيت كان حنا بريجيت حمل اسران كلتن تبع قالنا ما كان عايزون الله دمسيس ناس مقران اتينا لهم تاع علمهم يعني ما تاع المسافات رافضن ما نزل كابجا كم شيء على دمسهمنا احنا خدي اصلات كندي موتات لو حنا قيمنا تارم اجان لسان حدن لا سان شوعتن زار من هنا الماني سان اسران كلتن حم الثانيه نلتن مو عزم مصا تنسدران اسرون هجين نقول مسانا فتح ولا ما مثلا زي كساي كواقع رات مثلا ولا اطلنا القاس مثلا هجين كنس في الكعم كتبل نتفتر عصوم كانوا دحر خويلك سدر خان دحر عصوم كانوا مزي دك خان دحر تنطرا قدوسون كانوا ستايت غبر هفتا عطنا امفكت اقول خف بغفالو بقطا مزلكا بت محنر الله عدي اقول حزوا قالنا إنا عندنا هنا اولا
زموتو بزحاتهم الفي يبلهم درجه كل سرايت ميتين
او بزحات ميتين بزحات تايمو بزحات سرايت زنبره مسانا سرايت زنبره ولا نكال ارتا زنبرس بزح سميتي
Forced conscription and large campaign of mobilization is underway in Eritrea as the country launches a military offensive on Tigray, along with Ethiopian military, Amhara Special Forces, as well as Fano Vigilante Group. Reports have been coming out this week that the Eritrean government is carrying out a huge military mobilization after the resumption of hostilities. Our reporter Abil Zagabo has followed a recent development in Eritrea.
Forced conscription and massive campaign of mobilization taking place in Eritrea after the country launched joint military campaign along with Ethiopian forces against Tigray. According to Asana Eritrea television station, the conscription is taking place in most part of the country, especially in Agala and Amhara, a town in the southeast of Asmara. The TV station also reported draftees of Karen, the second largest city in Eritrea, have already joined the Eritrean Defense Forces. Last week, BBC reported that mobilization notices were distributed in the capital Asmara, in Karen, the western town of Tesanai, and other areas. Earlier to this report, multiple outlets, including the BBC Tigrinya, published that Eritrea has called up its reservists to join the army, with Eritrea's Information Minister Yemane Gabremasqal admitting the call on the reservists, dismissing the report on the mobilization of the entire Eritrean population. These reports comes out following the resumption of hostilities in Tigray, with Ethiopia, Eritrean and Amhara forces launching a joint military campaign breaking the humanitarian truce declared in March of 2022. In brief interview with Tigray television, Eritrean senior political analyst and activist Yosef Gabriel expressed the situation in Eritrea as severe as follows.
First of all, what they do is they target a village or a district, and then they surround it in the night time, and in the wee hours of morning, they get into the village before the villagers leave to work in the fields. Whenever they don't find the young men and women that they are looking for, then what they do is they order the entire family. That's where the collective punishment comes. They order the entire family out of their houses and throw them out on the streets. Literally, they will be rendered homeless. Then all of their property is taken by the government.
He also said forced conscription has been taking place in Eritrea for years, but it is different this time around as it is being conducted in every square of Eritrean territory without sparing any population room.
Who are the victims of this mass mobilization? Of course, the primary ones are the young men and women aged between 20 and 40. But as pointed above, there are not many of them left in Eritrea. That means that the Sha'biya feels that it has to replace them with other less potent population groups. The first one is made up of children and underage, literally child soldiers. So a good chunk of the army, of the Eritrean army right now, is made up of child soldiers.
My
name is Saeed Saleh Hassan. I'm 16 years old, Solidar. I am from Baz, Eritrea. At first, Eritrean soldiers arrested me in a border to Sudan, while I was trying to escape from Eritrea. Then they forced me to join Sawa for a military training. I am one of the 35th round graduates. It's been almost 3 months since I graduated. We didn't know where they would take us, but we were told that the Afar militia from Eritrea would show us the way. However, they left us somewhere. And then the war with Tigray forces started. Half of our members have died in the war, but we are alive because we are surrendered to Tigrayan forces.
Asked about mobilization and conscription taking place in Eritrea, member of Tigray Central Command Getachew Reda said that he doesn't wonder by the ongoing mobilization, stating that Eritrean government wants to crush Tigray now or never.
Press ganging, more people calling on its reserves to join the army, which simply shows you that it is here for the long haul. It wants to crush Tigray now or never. What we are saying is we'll fight for our rights, we'll fight for our survival, and we would like to call on our Eritrean brothers and sisters not to make the stupid mistake of assuming that the geriatrics in the Eritrean government should decide their fate and their friendship and brother relations with their neighbors and with their brothers and sisters. We'll stand our ground and we'll defend Tigray and will definitely prevail. Eritrean regime didn't fail to destroy us not because of lack of forces, but rather because of our resolve to defend ourselves. And that resolve is there stronger than ever. And it's very unfortunate that it's press ganging what little is left of the Eritrean youth into the army. But if the fighting instances the last 3 weeks are any guide, in many areas, those press ganged into the fighting do not fight well.
In August of 2019, Human Rights Watch published a report saying that thousands of young people are forced into indefinite national service, with the practice apparently driving many into exile and immigration. The report said Eritrea subjects young people to forced labor and physical abuse at the isolated Sawa military camp near the Sudanese border through conscription, causing many to flee the country. Among other grievances, female students are reported to be sexually abused at the camp as a top of their suffering from lack of sufficient food and medical care.
The political prisoners remain in jail, there is still no free media, and the parliament still does not exist. Just in mid-September, the former finance minister was arrested and remains in communicado detention as we speak. The government routinely violates religious rights. 3 Jehovah's Witnesses were arrested in 1994, and scores have been arrested since then and remain behind bars today. We've interviewed Eritreans outside Eritrea who explain that detention conditions in the country are horrific. Many have faced torture and abuse. We don't know the evidence against them. They've never had a day in court. And ultimately, they have ended up behind bars incommunicado for decades.
In his report submitted to UN Human Rights Council in Geneva in June of this year, UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Eritrea, Mohamed Abdesalim Babikir, said Eritrea's involvement in the armed conflict in Ethiopia shines a light on the impact of the Eritrean government's system of indefinite national military service. The report that was critical of the deteriorating situation in the state noted forced military conscription, arbitrary arrests, disappearances, and torture among the violations recorded, and called the rights situation in the country as dire.
The still occupied western Tigray has seen one of the most atrocious scenes, forcing more than 1 million of its residents to be internally displaced. Our reporters spoke with Zoda Girmay, an IDP from western Tigray, who says he's lost 3 friends while attempting to flee the gruesome ethnic-based massacres and tortures.
Zoda Girmay is an internally displaced person from Western Tigray and currently sheltering at Maiweni IDP camp in Mekelle. He says Amhara militia and Fano vigilante group committed unspeakable atrocities in the area, forcing many, including him and his friends, to take a dangerous route to safety. Zoda says he has lost 3 of his friends who drowned in Tekaze River while attempting to escape the brutalities of the Allied forces.
I am called Zoda Girmay. I come from Western Tigray, Adabai town. I am a teacher. Countless atrocities were committed in Western Tigray, and I witnessed many. The Amhara forces would come with machetes, axes, and knives and stop Tigrayans. Those who were lucky enough were shot with a gun. We decided to flee these brutalities and walked for around a week, hiding ourselves in bushes. 3 of my friends drowned in Tekaze River. They were too weak to swim and cross the river, as they were exhausted from the long journey, and they haven't had anything to eat for so long.
Zoda adds that Amhara forces used to threaten the ethnic Tigrayans in Adabai, saying that the Maikadra massacre would be repeated if they were to stay in the area.
We were unable to sleep. The Amhara forces would come at night to our houses and fire bullets to terrorize us. They would intimidate us, saying the Maikadra massacre would be repeated in Adabai.
The survivor also says that the Amhara forces claim that every property owned by the Tigrayans belonged to them, as the land does, and would loot everything.
The Amhara forces used to say that every possession held by Tigrayans belonged to the Amhara people, as it was made in the Amhara land. They would tell us that we had no more right to stay there. They were not treating us as humans. If they see you driving a car, they claim that it belongs to them. They were treating us inhumanly. They looted our possessions and we came here empty-handed.
The still occupied Western Tigray has seen the most horrific violence in terms of scale and systematic nature that attempted to rid Western Tigray of its majority Tigrayan population.
Pensioners Association in Mekelle says it has lost 28 of its members to siege-induced lack of food and medical supplies. Pensioners across the state are among the hardest hit by the ongoing siege that has passed its 15-month mark. Ailagaru reports.
The all-encompassing siege on Tigray has included the discontinuation of basic services such as telecommunication and banking, leaving millions in Tigray who have not been paid their salaries for about 15 months now on the brink. We spoke to some members of the Association for Pensioners in Mekelle who say that they have lost 28 members due to the siege-induced lack of food and medical supplies. They also say that hundreds more are to follow if the situation does not change soon.
Due to the war waged by the federal government, our pension is discontinued. Due to that, a lot of families are suffering from lack of food, from lack of medicine, and several also lost their life.
The basic necessity to establish our association, the Pensioner Association, is the problem itself, the suffering, because our monthly salary is already terminated for the past 15 months. Recent situation, there is a suffering, a shortage of food in all these surrounding 10,000 pensioners. Medical treatment, shortage of medical treatment. There is a human disaster. We can say it's a human disaster. Many of our members become dead, and others are really now in a heavy illness because of the shortages of the medicine, as well as the food and others.
The pensioners also condemn the recent aerial bombardments being carried out by the Ethiopian and Eritrean governments, stating that it is cruel to attack the people of Tigray who are already suffering from the siege.
The government also bombarding using airstrikes, drones. The vulnerable for this one are children, women, and older people.
The bombardment is all over Tigray. All these bombardments are illegal by the law. Because the law says, especially the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the 1948 says, every individual human being had the right to live freely, but we didn't.
Lastly, the pensioners call on the international community to put enough pressure on the Ethiopian government and its allies to stop their war and sit for a political dialogue.
The international community, they have to inflict the Ethiopian government, the Eritrean government, stop the war waged on Tigray and come up to the peace negotiation table called by the Tigray government.
Emergency response shall be provided as soon as possible.
Well, that concludes our news for the hour. Thank you for watching.